Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Stapledon, and I've got another one of my talks on behalf of the Friends of Williamson's Tunnels here. Um, I've covered a lot of subjects in this series of talks, and this time I thought I'd try and put forward a bit of a theory of my own. The problem with Joseph Williamson and everything about him is that we have so little actual factual information, and we do so much guessing. And we never really know whether our guesses or you know suppositions are anything like right or completely out. But all we can do is keep trying to work things out as we go along. So one of the most basic things about Joseph Williamson is the fact that he was digging all these quarries in Edge Hill. Why did it come about? What was the thing that started it off? And why so much mystery about it. Anyway, we'll have a go, and I have to say this is just my own pet theory about why and how some of it came about, and I could be completely wrong, but bear with me. So I'm starting with this picture here. You've seen it before, probably. It's a composite picture, a set of photographs stitched together, cut and spliced, taken from the roof of the police station on Smithdown Lane, which is quite a tall building, and is looking down across Smithdown Lane onto Joseph Williamson's workyard, which was this area here in the foreground. Right from when he came up to live in Edge Hill, I think this became his workyard while he was building houses behind up the top of the hill there, behind on Mason Street, and also quarrying over there to the left. And after he died, this area, this same area that had been his workyard, became corporation yard for the cleansing department. Horses and carts went around the street from here, collecting the rubbish. The buildings surrounding this area, this taken in the 1990s, late 1990s, maybe 1998 or thereabouts. These are all stable buildings and associated buildings to do with the keeping and maintenance and feeding of horses. Along the frontage were a row of other buildings. There was a vet's building, manager's building, but these are basically around a squarish sort of cobbled yard. And it remained like that way into the well, in fact, it's actually still there, or part of it is. Most of the stable buildings have gone. A couple of buildings here on this side are now incorporated into the Williamson Tunnels Heritage Centre, and the rest of them have all been demolished in the 1990s to make way for student flats. So, but all of this area in the foreground, stretching from over here along Smithdown Lane and right across this area where the workyard was and off to the right. This was all Joseph Williamson's land. And when he came up here, I believe he probably took on existing quarries that had been quarried for possibly hundreds of years by people who could just treat it as a free-for-all. Come and quarry out some stone if you wanted to build a cottage, build a wall, whatever, and just take the stone. And this has been going on for a long, long time. I think by the time Joseph Williamson came up here and took over some of these lands, it had probably become more formalized. And I believe that he continued the quarrying himself on a larger scale. And over this way on the left here, where these four-story flats are, which were there until just a few years ago, this was all quarried land. It's very difficult to tell just how steeply the ground rises from Smithdown Lane up to Mason Street behind here in some of my photographs, because they were all taken from the roof of the police station looking down. So you don't see how steeply the ground rises up there or up there. There's a massive 20-foot high brick wall here with the magnet joinery factory on top of it, because the land had to be built up to make it usable. But it doesn't quite show in these photographs. But anyway, in the early 1800s, and probably right up to his death in 1840, Williamson was quarrying this land along here. and he was digging deeply into the ground. He was not only quarrying into the hillside underneath where the magnet joinery factory is, he was also quarrying downhill, not just on the level. So these became very deep quarries. And I know for a fact from two borehole surveys that were done on this area here, at the base of the high wall and just behind the flats. The borehole drill went down 18 meters and more before it hit the solid bedrock. So this is all infill, filling in one of Joseph Williamson's quarries, which went straight in under the ground there. Um, and in most of this area, the sandstone bedrock is just below the surface. So to go down 18 meters before hitting it means a very, very deep quarry. So that's another picture showing it a bit closer. High wall here, and below it, somewhere dug into that area before the high wall existed. Well, the high wall is covering what we now know to be there, if it still exists, was Williamson's Great Tunnel. And that only existed because he was quarrying into the hillside there. But as usual, not just quarrying, but he vaulted over with brick arches to turn it into a tunnel. And this is what ended up here. This is just a little piece of a photograph that was taken somewhere around 1882, and the only one we've got showing the open-ended mouth of the Great Tunnel, which I believe was about 150 feet long, quite something. And then, of course, Williamson's triple-decker tunnel going off at 90 degrees to it there, and a whole series of arches to the left. They were all covered in 1899 by a massive, tall, 6 foot thick brick curtain wall to cover it over and hold up the land behind. Back on the other side of the railway line, as it's there now, in Williamson's workyard, you can now see Williamson's double tunnel, which became the main feature of the Williamson Tunnel's Heritage Centre. Two arches, one above another, going straight into the hillside there, and again going downhill into the hillside underneath, almost up to Mason Street at the back there. And the second tunnel goes in that corner, hidden by the trees, sort of parallel with it, going underneath these flats. This became the Heritage Centre eventually around 2002, after these bits of the tunnels were saved and weren't bulldozed away by the developers when they were building flats. And these two pieces of the stables for the horses are still there, fortunately. There's another one showing the double tunnel, and here in this corner, the corner tunnel goes in. It's a bit more obvious that the land is rising quite sharply there, isn't it, compared to some of the other photos. And here, going back to 1858, one of those lovely watercolor paintings by William Herdman, who was walking around the streets of Liverpool, recording street scenes everywhere he went, fortunately for us, before the days of photography. And this one, looking across Smithdown Lane, is quite definitely showing the open mouth of his Great Tunnel and the series of either short tunnels or arches alongside, all of which got hidden behind this great curtain wall, and some of Williamson's houses up there on the skyline behind the with Mason Street behind. Now, here's an aerial photo looking down onto a portion of Mason Street. This part of Mason Street is the important bit that we're most interested in. But the whole length of this, going further to the right and further to the left across the railway cutting, was all covered with Williamson buildings, Williamson's houses, up to well, I presume he built most of those houses in the earlier part of his career in Edge Hill from around 1806. Probably all would have been well and truly established long before he died in 1840. And this is the what you may have seen many times before in my slideshows. This is all that remains of Williamson's own house, 2 stories worth of his 3-story Georgian house, which was retained when all the rest and number 44 Mason Street next door were demolished in 1936 by Willie's Garage, who took possession of the property and demolished the whole lot and then put up this series of garage buildings on the whole plot of land that we now occupy, which we call the Williamson house site. On the land to the right here, up until 2016, we had the magnet joinery factory, now demolished. And that stood on land that was, the frontage here was occupied by more Williamson houses, those being numbers 26 to 38 Mason Street, which were demolished around 1900. Those flats we looked at earlier, they're down off Smithdown Lane, and this here is part of the buildings of the police station across the road. And we're looking down from the other direction, down into the stable yard. Some of the stable yard buildings are still there in the mid-1990s before they are finally demolished. And on the left-hand side of our Williamson house site, we have this building, which I've mentioned many, many times before. This building became the factory of Merseyflex. I believe it was probably constructed around 1950, and it replaced the Williamson houses, which would have been number, from this point here, number 46, 48, 50, and 52, 52A, up to the edge of the railway cutting. And more Williamson buildings being number 54, 56, 58, 60, going off to the left there, have been demolished when the railway cutting was constructed. This happened between 1880 and 1885, 80-foot deep railway cutting as it goes through this piece of land, which was Williamson's land, obviously. Don't know why I'm showing you this really, but this is the only photograph I think I've got, which shows number 44 Mason Street, alongside Williamson's house, with just the corner of his own house, number 40/42, just showing there on the right-hand side. And this is going right forward to 1926, when the area had gone seriously downhill, and all the rich merchants who had occupied Williamson's houses in the early years of the 19th century had moved on to nicer areas, and this had become quite a downbeat area. This is a photograph of Mason Street, looking up the street in 1916. Williamson's house is up there, number 40/42, with number 44 next door, shown in the last photograph. And then beyond that, 46, 48, 50, and 52, 52A remained standing right up until the 1940s. And these are right up against the edge of the railway cutting. In the foreground here is the railway bridge that carries Mason Street over the top of the railway cutting and on down to Lime Street. Going back to this for a moment, I wanted to explain, I'm being very long-winded about this, but what I wanted to explain was something that happened for us, which I thought was a great boon, a wonderful bit of, well, a lot of information that came our way, sort of accidentally. We had always been quite pally with the boss and the lads who worked at this Merseyflex factory next door to us while we were on our site. And we always knew that there were strange things going on underneath their factory floor. The factory floor was cracking up and sagging in various places. The lad who drove the forklift truck in there used to say he could feel the ground giving way as he drove over. Raised offices up on stilts had to have their legs packed out every time the ground sagged a little bit more. And we had the army plans that told us that there should be a large chamber underneath there. And as you may know, we actually managed to find it in 2019. Well, what was happening in the few years before this was that Liverpool City Council were either the owners or they were becoming the owners of all of this land, because they had big plans for this massive new development. It was going to be an extension of the Knowledge Quarter, and they were going to call it Paddington Village. And a lot of buildings were going to go in the process of creating this new Paddington village and spending absolutely millions and millions of pounds on what was to be there. And in I don't know how long they'd been working on it, and I think they probably were the landowners before anyway. They were certainly the landowners of our house site. I believe they were the landowners of the magnet factory and of the Merseyflex factory. And they were working on these people to get them to give up the remains of their existing leases. And by 2016, they had persuaded Magnets to relinquish the last bit of their lease, turn it over to the council, and they moved on to I don't know, wherever they moved on to, new premises elsewhere. It took a bit longer to persuade Merseyflex to go. They were probably quite happy where they were, but they were persuaded to sell out the last few years of their lease with LCC. And at the beginning of 2019, they completed the business and they moved on to a new factory building over in Speke, I think. So in 2016, the demolition crew moved in, and the magnet factory building, which is a perfectly good modern-ish building built around 1970, was demolished. The concrete base that it stood on was crumbled up, and they walked away, and the site has been left virtually empty ever since, except that it has been used on two occasions as a logistics site for developers who were putting up buildings in the area for the new Paddington development. These set of flats, by the way, were also demolished, and a great 13-story car park has gone up there. So Merseyflex were moving out at the beginning of 2019. I think it was in February 2019. The demolition company moved in, and they're starting to demolish the building there. This is our site next door, and they're just making a start on demolishing this building. That's looking at it at the other end. There's the frontage of Williamson's house there. And the manager was quite friendly with us. And one day he said, I've just collected this set of conveyancing documents, presumably from the solicitors after completing the sign over of their building and their land. And they're rather interesting. They go back a long way. Would you like to see them? And I was there, and I nearly bit his hand off. Oh, yes, please. We managed to borrow these documents, a great bundle of deeds and conveyancing documents of all sorts, from him, just for a few days, and went straight off to the Central Library in Liverpool town centre, and we had them all scanned and copied onto a memory stick. And I've had these documents ever since, and I've spent many, many hours poring over them. It's not easy to make sense of the legal talk. It's not easy to read the writing. Some of the copies were very poor, and we were rushed, but we got copies, and they were readable. They were all mixed up as well, but we've got them. And what I'm trying to work up to here, to back up my theory, is that after looking at all of these documents, I have discovered that many, many of them, not all, but many of them, have this little piece of wording on them. Wherever a building or piece of land is changing hands, whether it's by lease or whether it's by sale, because these documents go from 1882 right up until the 1970s, they all, or nearly all, seem to have this little bit of wording on them, which says, you do not have the mining and mineral rights to the land. Now, there's nothing under this land of any use. You won't be finding any gold, silver, lead, tin, anything else like that. But the sandstone itself is there, and there's a lot of it, and it's a valuable resource. But the wording says you do not have the mining and mineral rights, which means that whoever takes on the land should not be taking out the sandstone. And I think that's very important. This wording may have been there in conveyancing documents from the year dot, hundreds of years. And it could be that it's just one of those things that every solicitor who's involved will just copy from the previous document onto the new one because it's there. Oh, we better put that in. And it could be that it really isn't important. But to me, I feel as if it's a clue that tells us that Joseph Williamson might have been doing something which he wasn't officially supposed to be doing. Anyway, I'll say more about that in a bit. Just throwing in a couple of pictures here just because I can, and I've got them, and you may not have seen them again before, sorry. This is Smithdown Lane. This is in the 1960s. Very grainy picture, but it's a nice overhead view. These are the 4 blocks of flats on Elm Grove off Smithdown Lane, which were demolished just a few years ago, and we've got that massive 13-story, multi-story car park there now. This is a rare view. This is the drill hall that the Territorial Army built on Mason Street after they demolished the Williamson buildings, number 26 to 38 Mason Street. This is what replaced them. With a barracks building on the road side, which is lower and you can't see it. Next door, Willie's Garage buildings are there, and the railway cutting goes through just here and underneath Smithdown Lane. And here's the end of a big school which was called Paddington Comprehensive when it was built in the mid 60s, and that stood there until it was demolished to build this new Paddington Village development. And all of this area became part of the Paddington Village development. This is a rather strange wide angle view. And this shows Paddington Comprehensive School, which later became the Archbishop Blanche High School. Again, we're on Smithdown Lane. And there are those flats where we now have the 13-story car park. And all of this was earmarked for this new development of Paddington Village. So I'm going to go now to the conveyancing plans. Amongst all the documents that we borrowed and scanned and copied from the Merseyflex manager, there were quite a number of these plans, which are plans referred to in the writing. And they in themselves, if nothing else, are so useful because plans like this one goes back to 1882. They show the exact shapes and sizes, all to scale, of the Williamson buildings that stood on this street. This is Mason Street. This is Williamson's own house, number 40/42. And this here is number 44 next door. This all forms our piece of land that we call the house site. Then 46, 48, 50, and 52 next door. And it carries on 56, 58, 60. But this is where the railway was going to cut right through that land and across Mason Street. And this is just about the first of the conveyancing documents we've got, because what happened was the West Derby Wastelands Commission still owned all these properties. After Williamson's day, his leases, wherever he leased land and property, reverted back to the West Derby Wastelands charity. And they were the owners of this land up until the end of 1882, when by a compulsory purchase order and an act of Parliament, the London and North Western Railway Company bought this whole stretch of properties, because this is where they were going to drive their railway cutting right through. Where there had previously been a railway tunnel underground there, they were going to dig right down, open it out to twice the width, and put in this massive railway cutting going right through what was Williamson's land. This plan is, for clarity, I'm just putting this one. This is from 1922, when Williamson's own house and the house next door were being sold by the London and North Western Railway Company to a man called Samuel Jones, who bought up this pair of houses, Williamson's and the one next door, the Williamson house site as we know it, and he turned it into a second-hand machinery store. But as you can see by this time, well, see very clearly now, the railway cutting has gone right through this land. So the buildings of 46, 48, 50, and 52 remain standing. They weren't demolished when the railway was built, but from there downwards, 54, 56, 58, 60, over the railway cutting, and on the other side of it, they have all been demolished in the process of creating the railway cutting. Very interesting plans for us to have showing exactly what was there. So much detail, it even shows our sunken backyard behind Williamson's basement kitchen with a set of steps leading up to the ground level above. Excuse me. There's another one. This goes from 1941 when PM Williams' sons, who had built their garage on the site of Williamson's house, were now acquiring the plot of land next door that contained number 46 and 48 Mason Street. And the very year after that, they bought the other plot up to the railway, which is where number 50 and 52 Mason Street stood. And they then owned all of that land. So this is why they had all these conveyancing plans and we were able to borrow them. There's an earlier one again. This one goes back to 1884. It seems that this was all in the parish of Walton on the Hill at that time. I think that may have changed since. But here you've got the dotted line, which goes right through the area to depict where the railway cutting is going to be, even though it probably hadn't been properly created. They may have been starting to dig it out, but it certainly hadn't been completed. And again, you can see how it cuts through the row of Williamson buildings. There's another interesting one. This just shows a tiny little strip of land, probably about three yards wide, right alongside the railway. I don't know whether this is actually a conveyancing or it goes with a conveyancing document to denote that the railway company will always retain an easement. They either own a little strip of land or they will retain the easement and the ability to access the side of their railway cutting at all times. Whoever might occupy the land or the buildings alongside, they need access to their railway cutting walls for maintenance purposes. So that's what that one is all about. And here we go. This is one of those documents, and there were quite a number, with a section that tells me what I wanted to know. I'm not sure which one it is. It could be any one of them. I haven't written it down, but it says the schedule. All that piece of land situate on the southwest side of Mason Street, Liverpool, containing 412 square yards or thereabouts, and being shown in the plan drawn on the principal indenture therein edged red, on which said piece of land the buildings 50, 52, and part of 52A Mason Streets aforesaid were erected. And then the important bit, excepting all mines and minerals, if any, under the premises, as the same were accepted by the principal indenture. That has been copied from the previous document and the previous document and the previous document, probably whenever the properties were changing hands, excepting all mines and minerals, if any. So you do not have the right to be digging out the sandstone, is what it's saying, basically. And that's why I think Joseph Williamson was taking liberties. Excuse me. Here's a view looking, again, probably from the police station roof in the late 1990s. And it's looking at the back of the Merseyflex factory there. Willie's garage buildings are derelict by this time. I think this is 1998. The Paddington Gardens tenement blocks here are very vacant. They're being gutted before demolition in 1998. Willie's garage have vacated, and the people who took over from them, and they're just derelict buildings now. Merseyflex are still in full swing here at that point. And funnily enough, this, I believe, just here, right alongside this deep railway cutting, is a little piece of the original wall of number 52A Mason Street, which has been kept, retained, and still used while the rest of the Merseyflex factory building was built up onto it. They didn't waste any materials if they didn't need to. If there's a piece of wall that was usable, they kept it. They were real skinflints, I think. But it's strange, isn't it, that you've got an 80-foot deep railway cutting here, straight down in the ground, and yet they've managed to create it and dug out all that sandstone without demolishing the building that stood at the end here. This survived until at least 1942, long after the railway cutting. I think that's strange. Obviously, number 54, 56, 58 had to go because they were above the railway, and some of the houses on the far side of the railway they've demolished as well. And why am I showing this one? Oh, yes. If you look at this spot here, this is number 52A, Mason Street, the last house that was left standing of the Williamson row. And that back corner juts right up to the wall of the railway cutting. It's so close, and yet they managed to do what they did without demolishing that house. And there's a funny story because in sometime last year, 2024, we now occupy this site, the Merseyflex building site next door, as a visitor car park, sort of semi-unofficially. And we quite familiar with what's on the site and what it looks like. And one day, it happened to be on a Wednesday when we were on site, the some lads turned up, went on the site, and wanted to do a job on the railway wall, and we was rather surprised. Thought, I don't know anything about this. What are you doing, lads? You know, and they said, oh, we've been sent. They weren't Network Rail workers, but they were sent by Network Rail. Been sent to do a repair job on this piece of wall. And we said, why? What's wrong with it? And oh, it's damaged. So here we go. This is the little piece of railway wall along the far side of the Merseyflex site, and it does look rather strange. This is after they've done their so-called repair, and there's a piece of stone set right in there, and it almost looks like something has driven into it and damaged it, but it isn't. We were the people that knew the answer. This is where the corner of number 52A Mason Street jutted into where the wall was going to be. And the building was there before the wall was there. And it's fairly obvious when you look at it that they've actually built the railway cutting perimeter wall onto the corner of the existing building. And you can see that they worked from both directions, and the stone lines don't line up. They're higher on one side, lower on the other. Anyway, these lads wanted to do what they were told to do anyway, and they did this little repair job. Beautiful brickwork and totally out of keeping with the wall. But they did it, and they went away happy. But there's nothing on the other side to show that there was, a damaged area of the wall. It's just where the corner of the building went. And here is that exact same spot looking down into the railway cutting. This is one of those photographs of the railway cutting construction work from the 1880s, set of wonderful photos, which I have shown on one of my talks before. And this here is the back corner of number 52A, right up against the railway wall. And this is not complete at this point. They've still got a long way to go down, probably only halfway down with this cutting. But this is the spot, and the picture's taken from the Mason Street Bridge, looking down towards Smithdown Lane Bridge, further down the hill. And this one is nothing to do with that particular spot, but it's a very useful photograph in the same series that shows you just how deep this cutting was as it goes through that land. Amazingly deep. But there you go. And just once more, here is the wording. Accepting all mines and minerals, if any, under the premises, as the same were accepted by the principal indenture. I believe that means that Joseph Williamson was as secretive as he was, kept a low profile, didn't invite anybody to see what he was doing, either below or above ground, just kept his head down and got on with it, just him and the men who worked for him. And I don't believe anybody was ever invited, with one exception, ever invited in to see what was going on. And I think he was probably cutting the stone out legitimately from his quarries further down the hill on Smithdown Lane. But up here on Mason Street, when he started building houses, he cut out some of these deep quarries first to get the stone out, going down to 10 meters. And I think this is something that he was doing quite illicitly when he shouldn't have been taking the stone out. But of course, he got away with it. He dug these, I think he probably had these quarries dug very quickly. using lots of local men who just needed work. And they were probably all sworn to secrecy. You don't talk about what goes on here or you're out of a job. And as soon as they got the quarry as deep as they wanted to go, they would just vault over it in brick arches, and then he could put in the cellar and then put his three-story house on top. And this is what was underneath his house. This is what we call the banqueting hall, the big chamber under Williamson's own house. He's gone down to about 30 feet under this land, and he's vaulted over in these beautiful brick arches, and then he's built his own three-story house with cellars as well above there. And he's hidden the results of what he was doing, getting the benefit of the stone, using it himself and probably selling it. And just along the street underneath the Merseyflex building, the big chamber that we discovered in 2019, is exactly the same sort of thing. This one is, we now know because we've had a borehole survey done, this one goes down to 10 meters below ground. The roof of it is about 4 meters below, and then it goes down to 10 meters before we hit bedrock. And it's almost completely filled with this sandstone waste material. But exactly the same thing, number 50. His building, number 50 Mason Street, was built directly above this one. So there's a pattern here, and he's done it in other places. Of course, he did it up at Paddington with his 5-story buildings on there and going down to 60 feet below ground. So I think this was done on the quiet without letting anybody see, and nobody knew what was going on until after he was dead and gone in 1840. Now, just one final little thing before I stop this. I've gone on far too long. The only person that we're aware of who ever got to see Joseph Williamson's workings with permission while he was alive was a Dr. George Watson. And I only found this or refound this little bit of information quite recently, reading the writings of the historian Charles Hand, who wrote a paper about Williamson in 1916. And he's written about this particular item, that Williamson would not allow any inspection of his operations. He's only known to have issued one order to do so, and this he gave to Dr. George Watson, who thus referred to his works. Their extent is very laconically expressed in a quaintly worded permit, which Williamson wrote out for me when living, and which he told me would enable me to pass the workman at any time. It read, "Dr. Watson is not to be interrupted in his walks on my premises, either on the surface or under the surface." And it's dated 7th of August, 1839. JWEH. That stands for Joseph Williamson Edge Hill. So August 1839. Very late on in his life. He was 70 then, and he died the following year in May of 1840. But Dr. George Watson seems to be the only person who was ever given permission to go onto Williamson's land, freely walk around below ground, and not be interrupted by his workmen. So that's quite an interesting little fact, I think. I don't know why he did that, except that I think Dr. Watson had become rather perturbed about the state of public health in the area, which was very, very poor around that time and got worse. And quite possibly because some of Williamson's underground spaces had started to be used as a tipping ground for waste, because it was easy, and even had sewers turning into them as well. So they very likely became dreadful places and caused an awful stink, and were a serious hazard to health. So because of this, Dr. Watson may have consulted with Mr. Williamson and been given permission to have a walk around on his land and try and see what was going on there. But that's all I've got to say on the subject. I hope you found that interesting, and have to find another subject for next time. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening.